music, like we're heavily into CDs now, and you can fit as much music as you can.
Yep.
So it's like, like a lot of guys are doing 14, 16 track records.
Right.
I thought it was crazy. So, maybe they just felt, hey, let's expand the repertoire a bit and put these things on.
That could be.
Was Van Halen like that? Because, back in the day when they were with Dave, I mean, none of their albums clocked over like 40 minutes. I mean, you were lucky to hit the 35 mark. So it's just wondering, by the time you were working with them, if they were of that attitude where we're like, we're going to stick as much music as we can on this disc.
Well, the biggest driving factor of that was, back in the day, it was like what you could fit comfortably on a vinyl. I think that always topped out at about 35 minutes, and you could stretch to say 38, but then you couldn't cut it as loud because you had more grooves, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And I think as the CDs came out, or initially, I think bands were quite excited. Hey, we could add more material and put more on for the fans, and more fans will buy this because there's more bang for the buck. But as that progressed, then they're realizing that with their deals with the labels, they're only still getting paid basically for 10 songs. So the band is sort of donating the extra songs, and they're not really getting paid for them.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's funny.
Okay,
and it extended the time for the recording sessions, because now instead of doing 9 songs or 8 songs, now you're doing 14 and 16 songs. Well, it's taking you longer, but the budgets started shrinking then, and now they're making you do 14 or 18 songs for less money than it would take you to do 9 songs before, and you're not getting paid for them. So it just became this weird, what the hell are we doing?
Right. That's funny. That's funny. So now, in terms of the song Amsterdam, do you remember the song Amsterdam? Does that ring a bell?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So now,
Wham, bam.
Yeah, exactly. So the funny thing,
everybody remembers that line.
Yeah, everybody remembers that line. Like Dave just said, it's a controversial line in the Van Halen community with all the fans, because the lyrics, wham, bam, oh, Amsterdam, was that a bone of contention? Do you remember any of that, like some sort of discussion about that, or wanting to fix that, or any sort of tug of war over that song?
Oh, not at all. No,
really?
It was a great hook, and, Bruce is all about getting any hook he could on anything, because that's what drew people in. I never heard that it was a controversy while we're doing it, so... Okay. It was just awesome, and that one always stuck in my head, just with, with the guitar riff and wham, bang, it's awesome.
Yeah. That's funny. So now the song "Not Enough," which was the ballad, kind of a different song for Van Halen. I don't know if you could shed any light on this. That was sort of added in later in the process. Do you remember anything about that a ballad was added sort of later in the process?
I don't, but again, that could fit well into Bruce's thing, because he always liked records to have a flow, and you got to kind of speed it up, slow it down, and they might say, hey, we don't have another ballad. Ballads were usually really great songs for radio and stuff, so that could have been thrown in late at the game. We looked at what they had, and Bruce might have said, hey guys, we need another slow song. So
now, does Bruce, is he back and forth with you on the mixes, or is kind of his job done, or does he still get involved, or how does that work?
He's still totally there. He would come in again, with the band guys, and they'd all listen to it, and then we'd all kind of discuss it. Bruce would maybe have his requests or changes, or saying, hey, I think this sounds great. The band might say, oh, this and that. Sometimes, Bruce would back them up and say, no, I feel that the drums need to be louder in this song, or whatever. Right. Or sometimes Bruce would say, no, I disagree. The vocal needs to be this loud, or the guitars need to do this, So we'd all work on it together. But, Bruce at that point was always still very much involved, for sure.
So when you were mixing this album, is there anything unique about mixing a Van Halen album, or any particular challenges you had with Van Halen's sound that you didn't have with other artists?
No, I don't remember that, though I do remember that, I was sitting there, and there was 15-year-old me sitting there going, holy fuck, I can't believe I'm mixing Van Halen right now.
That's incredible.
I do remember at the beginning of the mixing process, and I sort of, on the first song, and I can't remember now what the first song we mixed was. I remember Eddie coming in, and he thought the drums were too wet. He wanted a drier sound on the drums.
Okay.
So I remember, tweaking that a bit, and then once you figure out the direction the band's wanting it to go, or the band and Bruce, then you dial it down. But I do remember that, because I kind of done my thing, and Eddie goes, oh, yeah, no, the drums are too wet. I'm like, and I, I put 100% in, and, when somebody says something like that, I get a little bit crushed, but, it was all good.
Now, did Al come in the next day and say, hey, they're too dry?
Yeah, exactly. And then him and Eddie would go off in the back room and duke it out for a bit, and it was all good.
Oh, yeah. Was that a common practice?
No, not at all. But, just sometimes with the brother things. I did a few records with brothers.
Right.
And, sometimes that could be, well, it's just a brother thing. Let them go off to the back room and talk about it. But no, it was all good on this one.
That's funny. And in terms of the record company, was the record company involved much? Did they call you up and say, hey, we want this one for a single. We want you to, make this put a little more polish on this. Was there any involvement in their end?
No, most of the records I've done, the label is not very much involved. Bruce and the band would probably take more of the brunt of that, through the management. But
sure.
But while we're in the studio, they just kind of let us do our thing. And then when the record's done, they present it. And I'm sure if there was anything the label was lacking, like, oh, we need another ballad, or we don't hear the radio hit, that's when they would say something. But, that wasn't the case on this record.
Sure. Now, was Sammy and Mike sort of like one camp and the brothers another? Did it seem like there was some sort of two different sort of sides?
Well, at my stage, everybody was a big band of brothers.
Okay.
Obviously Alex and Eddie were there at the studio most of the time because,
right.
Eddie lived there.
Right.
I remember Sammy would come in when it's time to do vocals, and
right.
then when he was sort of done, he'd kind of leave.
Okay.
And similar with Mikey,
right.
But, Mikey was around, maybe a bit more than Sammy, but it was all one happy camp. There wasn't any one side or the other. And, again, I'm just meeting these guys too, so I'm just sort of catching up on the hierarchy and, who's here and who's there and who's around. But, it was all high fives and fist bumps and all that. The whole thing.
Sure.
So this is happening in 1994. Grunge is king.
Yeah.
Was there any desire or any pressure to get a quote-unquote grunge sound on this album?
Meaning what? I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, so there's a Seattle Nirvana grunge sound that was the current trend at the time. And I'm just wondering if anybody from the record company or anybody in the band or anybody was like, hey, I want that sound, or somebody else was shooting it down and saying, there's no way we're going for that sound. We're just doing what we're doing.
Right. Yeah, I thought you said one sound. I didn't hear grunge.
Oh, sorry. It's the United States accent. I apologize.
So good, my brother. No, that never even came into the equation at all because, especially with an established band like Van Halen, nobody's chasing the popular sound, hopefully. And also, at the demo stage, we're just running things out and making it sound as good because I think, at that stage too, we were recording everything, but, impossible, hey, maybe this could make the record. So, I don't even know how much of my recordings were used on the record, but, as we're going through them, that was sort of the idea, hey, this is great, and we'll get all these, how many ever songs we get down, get a producer in, and then, go from there was kind of the idea, but, it was never like, hey, let's sound like this, or hey, let's do this. It's like, like I said, Alex and I worked hard on getting the drum sound that Alex wanted, obviously influenced on their past drum sounds. Like, yeah, but, this was great on that record. And, so him and I kind of did our thing on the drum sound and, worked hard with Eddie on his sound, which, isn't really a lot of work because, he just touches the guitar and it just freaking sounds awesome.
Right, exactly.
But, it's down to getting them happy so that when they're performing, they're not thinking about the sound and, oh, I'm not hearing this and, oh, I don't like this. you want them happy, and that's how you get your best performances, when they're like totally into it and just get lost in what they're playing. Then that's when you get the best stuff. So that's sort of what I try to do with them.
And in terms of the end result, when you handed in the mixes, was there anything they had to go back in and re-record, or, hey, we want to change that, or we need this redone, or like was any sort of nips and tucks like that?
No, sometimes when you're mixing, though, and I can't remember if you did on this one, but sometimes when you're mixing, and by the time you get through the 11 or 12 songs or whatever it was, then you go, oh, you know what, we got a way better vibe now. Let's go back and remix the first song or the first two songs.
Oh.
So sometimes you'll do that.
Okay.
But just to kind of pull it, you've got more of a handle on where this record is going, because, you know, you just make a song sound as good as you can, and then the next song, and then maybe later on you've got sort of a better vibe for where the drums and the bass kind of sit and where the guitars sit. And it's like, oh, yeah, on the first one, those drums aren't slamming as much as they need to, or something like that. So then you just quickly go back, and it's basically a quick fix, but it's not a rewrite or a redo or anything. It's just sort of an adjustment, you know.
What about in terms of the tracking order? Do you put it in a tracking order that you think works? Do they tell you what the tracking order is? How does that work?
That's more of a producer and a band thing.
Okay.
And at that point, especially back in those days, you know, when it really mattered on vinyl, as you know, and I guess CDs and cassettes, it really matters kind of tracking order, because it's what leads the listener. So there'd be a lot of probably more input from management, the label, the band's got a good idea, the producer's got a great idea. You know, I just sit there and do what they tell me at that point. But
right.
You know,
right.
nowadays where it's more streaming and everybody just grabs a song here and grabs a song there, it's a little less important for tracking order.
Right.
Because you're, as a listener, you're not forced to listen to the record in a certain order. So
Sure. Absolutely.
Do you think that's better or worse?
You know what? Just because I'm from back then, I used to love having a new record, bring it home, put it on the turntable, you know, hear the needle drop and the hiss and crackle, and then, you know, the song, and then you just sit there and go on the journey that the band is trying to present you, you know. Again, if you liken it to a movie, you know, you sit down and watch the whole movie. Well, how would you like to go in and go, I'm just going to look at all my favorite scenes, and they're completely out of order, and yeah, they're great. Oh, that was awesome. Oh, I love when the car fell off the cliff. But, you know, what's the point? So, you know, when these artistic creators are creating a soundscape for you and want you to listen to, you know, for me, it's nice to listen to what the artist was trying to present. And then you go back and listen to your favorite songs. But, you know, I don't know. For my first listen, I like listening from song one all the way to the end and see the journey, you know.
Absolutely. And in terms of comparing working with Van Halen to working with other bands, how would you compare the process? Was it similar, different, or?
Oh, totally similar. You know, the one different thing for me, you know, at the beginning, because, you know, it was all in the band's studio. So, you know, having to go to their house every day and all that was a bit different, because usually you're sort of in neutral ground,
right,
so to speak,
right,
you know, in another studio, and we all meet up there.
Right.
You know, you sort of meet up there, and Eddie's still in his dressing gown and got his coffee going. Oh, I'll be back. I'll come out in a minute. I still got to have a shower and all that, you know.
Right.
Like, okay, I'll just hang out here, you
right,
know, kind
right.
of thing. But you know, it was the same thing. It's like, you know, all us guys are just, you know, focused on getting the best song recorded and done and created. So it's very similar, for sure.
Absolutely. Now, when you were working with Eddie, had he cut his hair at that point?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, he had shorter hair then.
Right. He had the short hair. So did he have like a different vibe because he was sober and he had the short hair and everything?
I guess I hadn't met him previous.
Okay.
But, you know,
okay.
I just remember the short hair and the goatee. I know sort of his tech guys and stuff were saying, oh, yeah, you know, Eddie's been straight for, you know, I don't know how long it was. And, you know, he'd show up with a non-alcoholic beer and all that, and he just seemed, you know, really bright and focused. And,
okay.
You know, I've just known Eddie like, you know, most of the fans just from
right.
what you see
right.
in the magazines.
Right, exactly. And in terms of working together again, was there ever any talk of working together again?
Oh, for sure. Yep, there was. You know, and I think that's why I got to work on the mix, for sure, because, you know, like they went off and basically recorded the record with Bruce.
Right.
But, you know, hey, we got to do this again.